It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Well, folks, when you go and vote, you have no problem. Just walk in, vote, walk out. But sometimes it's difficult for people who are disabled. Sometimes they cannot vote because the places are not permitting them to go in to vote. So Misericordia did something about it. They did a documentary. And today we have, excuse me, the two people who are responsible for that documentary. We have Assistant Professor of Communications, Dr. Melissa Scroy, and Professor Dan Kimbrough, who is Assistant Professor of Communications. They put together a documentary, and they're here today to discuss it, and it's my pleasure to have them with us. Melissa and Dan, thanks for coming on the Sam Lesante Show. Interesting enough that I never thought about these things. It never even thought about me. When Paul called me and talked about, the documentary that you were doing, I said, well, what's it about and the whole bit. So for those people who may not understand what we're talking about, and maybe we could shed some light on this, which I think is very interesting. We take it for granted. We just go and vote, no problem, walk out. But there's some people who want to vote and they just can't. So let's talk about, why did you first of all, the topic was what? What was Well,
the topic was barriers to voting for people with disabilities, and we got involved in it. Dan Kimbrough, my colleague, is very interested in multicultural education, and my research focus is disability and media education. And so you really hit on the most important part of it, and that is most people, unless we're living with a disability or we're serving the role of a caretaker, we don't seem to notice all of the very serious barriers that exist in society that prevent people with disabilities from living their lives. And the research clearly supports that. And so what we wanted to do is we just wanted to see if people could vote, because voting is a right and not a privilege. And everyone should be able to access their polling place and vote, and that's not what we found.
So, but to start off with, this is not a Democrat or Republican thing. This is just basically having the right to vote and be able to vote. And then, how did you get involved with the project?
As was said, I spent a lot of time working on multiculturalism on campus and off campus in my past. And so her research, looking at disability, approached me and said, would I be interested in doing this? And sure, why not? I love shooting documentaries. And the topic is something that even I hadn't really sort of thought of, the idea of, can you physically get in the place to vote? So when we went, it was really interesting to just sort of observe from the outside, which is what we did. Show up, observe, and just sort of see what barriers truly do exist. And again, you're right, it's not about Democrat or Republican or any other party. It's about being able to elect a party in the first place. You've got to be able to get in before there's a party system that we can even worry about. And so it was really just sort of interesting, and I'm glad that she brought me on board, because I hadn't thought about it either. The notion of walking into any place and being able to vote. And that's the way you said it, walking in. Not everyone's walking. People are in wheelchairs. People need assistance having someone else bring them in. We assume that you walk into buildings. Not everyone does, and that's the problem.
And I think that goes into the understanding what disability is. Sometimes people think disability, they think wheelchairs, okay? Or someone who cannot, on crutches. How would we define disability?
This is a really important point, because every time we talk about disability, we talk in terms of functional limitation. And even the Americans with Disabilities Act defines disability as functional limitation. So the problem is within me, my body. But what the recent scholarship shows, and by recent, I mean the past 20, 30 years worth of scholarship, is that people with disabilities are a very clear minority group. And disability does not exist within the person, it exists within disabling environments that are created by society. Very important distinction. So then, of course, a lot of people who aren't familiar with these issues might say, oh, well, gosh, we're giving special accommodations or whatever to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to participate in different ways. But the truth of the matter is we're not. And so the definition needs to be this: what are you able to do but are prevented from doing because of either a social environment or a constructed environment? So what are you already able to do but prevented from doing? So if I am on crutches, for instance, or in a wheelchair or whatever functional ability we want to use, I am able to vote. I'm able to think about the candidates. I'm able to become educated about the candidates as much as people do. And I'm able to go in and understand how to operate the voting machine and to cast my vote. I am prevented from getting into the building if it's not handicap accessible. So that's what I mean. What are we able to do but are prevented from doing? It's not about functional limitation. It's about barriers that exist in society simply because people don't think about it, and you open the show with that, and I really appreciate it.
And it's interesting because you see, when, thank God, we're healthy or we can get around and we're very mobile, we don't think about those things. However, I asked you a question, and I said, well, how many do we have people who are disabled who cannot vote? The answer to me, if I was answering it, I don't care if it's one, or I don't care if it's 100. The fact is that one person has every right to vote as we do, and we can't discount that, okay? And I think that's, the point. I mean, I know there are a lot of, inhibitions in the world today, but putting them aside, that's why I said, I don't want this to turn into, well, they want more Democrats or they want more Republicans. That's not the point. When you're disabled, you're disabled. You do not have that right to do that. Well, in doing that, in finding this out, and we're going to show the documentary when we come back after the break, what particularly, Dan, in your mind, okay, because sometimes college professors have agendas, okay, and they get tied up in an agenda, and that's all they think about, and they don't, but looking at the broad picture here, okay, looking at this as to what can we do, okay, the thousands of people who will watch this show and see this documentary, what do you want to get out of the show, Dan? I
think the big thing, it's an educational piece. It's the purpose. Everyone who's seen it always says, I hadn't thought about that. People that we interviewed the day of, I hadn't thought about that. The reason these things exist are because no one brought it to our attention. Well, that's what we want to do. We want to bring it to people's attention so that people will think about it. And the next time you walk in a building, stop and look. Could someone else who's in a wheelchair, could someone who just having a day where their leg hurts and they just can't walk all that well, how high is the ledge to get into a building, those little things. So at the end of the day, it's really about educating people that people are different in multiple ways. And we have to start thinking about all of those ways. Every place we go, everything that we do, because if we don't, we will exclude people from society who are functional, who can do, who can think, who can perform. There's just a barrier that society's put up.
And are very brilliant. There are a lot of brilliant people
who can contribute.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Okay. My mother, who was 81, 82 years old, okay, she passed when she was 90, but over when she was, read 3 newspapers a day and voted all the time, whether it was Democrat, Republican, she voted. And she was having problems with her legs and difficulty walking, okay. But I remember even the steps going into, our home or our apartment were maybe this big and very difficult, we take it for granted when you're healthy. She couldn't make those steps, all right? And so you think about that. Her mind was as sharp as you can be, thank the good Lord, but did not have the ability of doing that. And I think this is where, more of the awareness comes into it. Now we also come into the other factor is that some people think, well, yeah, they want to do everything for everybody. Well, that's not the case. I think the case is we're looking at a right to vote here. How expensive do you think, there's a good question here, will increasing accessibility be cost prohibitive? Okay.
It could cost almost nothing. A couple of points I want to make. As a result of this documentary, Luzerne County Board of Elections was published in the Times Leader, had discovered that they had wheelchair ramps that they had purchased with a federal grant and they had never used, or they were in storage and maybe they did use them years ago. So that's the first thing, that we need to be more mindful of it, and monies are available. But the other thing is there's a website that's provided by the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division that is actually called Tips for Making Polling Places Accessible. And you can put down a piece of plywood over a threshold. If you don't have handicapped accessible parking, clear signage, you can go to the drugstore and write some and put it on a wall or whatever. Or if a door can't be opened because it doesn't have an automatic opener and someone couldn't make the swing of the door, prop it open. So honestly, a lot of these answers cost very little or nothing at all. It's more like Dan said, that people, all of us, really have to start thinking about what it is to not be us, but to be someone different.
It's interesting. We said awareness. Mm-hmm. Basically, and it comes down to simple little things like this. Hopefully, what hopefully will happen is that all the polling places prior to election will be, get notification as to, are you handicapped accessible for people who are disabled, not necessarily in wheelchairs. So then they could do some of the things that you're talking about. What will it take for, someone who can walk, just about can walk like my mother used to be, and wheelchairs that they could bring into the polling places? I mean, that would be great, if they, and is this one of the reasons of the documentary then, Dan?
Yeah, I think again, it's about the awareness and it's about the education. And early on, a lot of people said, "Oh, well, you kind of pulled the wool over people's eyes." It's not meant to be a gotcha piece. It's truly about making people aware. It's not about getting buildings in trouble. It's about saying people have the right to vote. And if people are going to vote and you're going to pick a location, we need to make sure that everyone can get into the location.
I'm happy you said that, Dan, because again, there's always things that people have agendas, and it's unfortunate, okay, when people have strong agendas and they try to jam them down anyone's throat. I don't like that. But I think what you're doing is, what both of you are doing in the communications department, is to bring awareness, okay, and hopefully, by this, we don't know how many people are not voting because of that. We have no idea. It could be 100, it could be 1, it could be 1,000. We have no idea, okay, about that. Folks, I'm talking to assistant professors, Dr. Melissa Scroy and Dan Kimbrough from Misericordia. The sister, well, when I was at King's College, we used to go and visit Misericordia. That's when it was all male. Of course, there's my older brother who graduated then. I'm the younger brother. When we come back, we're going to show you that documentary. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Remember, 24/7, ssptv.com. Thank you so much for all the nice comments we're getting. And also those constructive comments, folks, on my website. Mine is sam@ssptv.com. Please let me hear your suggestions. I appreciate it. Future shows. Governor Corbett will be here, or I'll be with him. Congressman Cartwright, and we have Dan Muser. A lot of interesting things coming up, folks, going on what's happening in the political scene. My guest today, Assistant Professors of Communications, Dr. Melissa Scroy, and Professor Dan Kimbrough, who did a documentary. So what we're going to see now is this documentary that you put on for people, polling places that are not accessible for people with disabilities, correct? Mm-hmm. All right, so let's look at this documentary now.
Marywood University senior Christian Budney has voted in every election since he was 18 years old. Christian, who became paralyzed as a result of a snowboarding accident when he was 17, uses a specially configured van that accommodates his wheelchair and the help of Angie, his mother and caregiver, to get to the polls.
Why don't you park over here on the left? Over there, you see that? There's so many people in our country that love to complain and stuff, and I'm one of them. And if I'm not going to vote, I think you really don't have a right to complain, and you have to express your democratic right as an American.
Angie and Christian say their neighborhood polling place at McNichols Plaza in Scranton is accessible. Inside, Christian said, some voting machines are placed on shorter tables to accommodate him in his wheelchair.
I'm very grateful for how close it is to my house, the polling place, and that it's it's pretty easy for me to get in. I could get in, and then once I'm in, there's a lower table because the higher spots to vote I can't really reach at, but the lower tables makes it easy so I could have the ballot right next to me, fill out what I need, and it's good.
Nicholas Chestnut, judge of elections at McNichols Plaza, said he ensured that the voting process inside of his polling place was smooth for all voters. But while the polling place is fully accessible inside, outside, that was not the case. There was no signage indicating handicap accessible parking near to the entrance. The only sign is many yards away at the entrance to the parking lot. Chestnut said while he had received training from the Lackawanna County Department of Elections about voting accommodations, he said he was not aware of building accessibility issues. As he spoke, a large SUV blocked the parking spaces closest to the door. So if I am handicapped and there's no place for me to park in this specific situation that's going on right now, what do I do?
What you do is whoever's accompanying with the handicap.
Why? They can drive themselves.
They can
So
drive
say I'm
themselves.
driving myself.
Say you're
I am
driving.
driving myself. I'm with no one. I have a handicap accessible car. I drive myself. But what I need is a clearly marked place close to the entrance that, you know, is open to me. And right now you've got this big truck and everything. So what would I do?
Mr. Shedden. In that situation, I could understand where it could be kind of inaccessible and impossible to kind of get out and vote. And that's something that we're going to have to change today, throughout the day.
A lack of handicapped accessible parking, inaccessible building entrances, or other barriers to people with disabilities existed at every polling place we visited. At a polling place on South Mead and Moyallen Streets in Wilkes-Barre, there were no curb cuts close to the building, which is a field house used by GAR High School. Judge of Elections Nikki Gordon said curb cuts are the responsibility of the city.
This is GAR's bunkhouse. So we can't say, all right, guys, you need to blast out that street. And we have to wait for all of the paperwork to go through. Then that paperwork has to be met by whatever red tape is met. It has to be crossed.
Right.
Then they have to come in and then they have to blow it out. So it essentially becomes a city issue.
But she said it's also an issue that the training provided to judges by the Luzerne County Bureau of Elections did not address. Why is it that you folks don't have the kind of education and training you need in order to know that, gosh, you know, I should probably arrange-
have one of these.
Could you use it?
Yeah, I could have. There were a lot of things. I mean, now mind you, we did get a lot of training on how to actually operate the poll. But all of the ancillary things like, hey, I have a woman who's coming in not only is she in a wheelchair, but she's got cerebral palsy and she's in a multitasking chair. So I need to be able to get her into the voting poll, which I wouldn't even know if this would constitute the driveway that is connected to the field that they could
Right,
take
that
the
driveway
driveway
there,
here
right.
and bring her in. But even still, I'm needed in there? Okay, can I get her there?
6th District Democratic Chair Al Cibello, who was standing outside of the polling place, told us he believes the city will soon make accommodations by installing the curb cuts.
And they're going to cut this. You know, the city will come in and get this taken care of. There's no problem with this. This is easy, and it's easy to get. There's a big door over there. Open up the garage door.
It's
if
all
somebody
on
wants to get
ground
in.
level.
Right,
it's
so
all
if someone
good.
can get here
Oh,
from
yeah,
the curb,
yeah.
it's nice and
Oh
accessible.
yeah,
and
easy,
it's,
no
it's
problem.
wide
That'll
and
be taken
paved.
care of by next primary.
But the work may not end there. Although the field house did have large garage-style doors, the door in use had a threshold that noticeably protruded from the ground. It's just under 2 inches tall. Just under 2 inches tall, and it's made of concrete. So there's a bit of a step between the ground and what you'd need to do to get in there. So if you had a wheelchair, something around 2 inches might be a bit of a barrier.
Well, this happens, and because years past, nobody ever made a complaint. Somebody like you didn't come in and say nothing. So we let it go, let it slide. And this is not the only area. You can probably go through the whole county, through the whole state of Pennsylvania, you'll see the same problem.
Democratic State Representative Eddie Day Pashinsky greeted voters as they made their way into the polling place.
It's a matter of education. It's a matter of sitting down and working on a problem that you're obviously pointing out and making sure, again, that everybody that's an American citizen has the right to vote. And if handicap accessibility is an issue, it has to be addressed.
At the other end of town, a polling place at Myers High School was accessible only by a wide concrete staircase. While we were there, a man slowly guided a woman up the stairs and into the building. There was no clearly marked accessible parking. There were, however, several accessible entrances on the side of the building deep into an alleyway. There are no handicap parking signs, so I imagine if I pull in off the street, I would just have to leave my car here. So even if I knew, without any signs, to drive all the way back here between 2 very large buildings to park my car, I don't know where I would park. I guess just in the middle. I would have to walk all the way down to, it looks like the 3rd or 4th door on the side of the building, and there are no signs, except for this one where it says now finally handicap entrance. And it does not have an automatic door opener, so if I'm in a wheelchair, I wouldn't be able to physically pull the handle and then gain access. But it's locked anyway. The polling place at the Dallas Borough Building looked very much the same. Access was available through the front door, but reaching it required voters to climb, sometimes very gingerly, a narrow set of stairs. There is a driveway that leads to the rear of the building, but no public parking is permitted in the rear lot. The space is reserved for police vehicles only. There was no handicap-accessible parking signage anywhere. Like the other judges, Linda McDermott said she received training about voting accommodations, but none of it addressed barriers to building access.
In the big picture of things, maybe this is something that needs to be addressed with the Board of Elections and the voter administration, because they send us tons of signage that we're obligated to put up, that we're obligated to take down and send back to them, but that certainly could be something that could be added to that.
The story and the site was once again similar at the Dallas Township polling place, which is housed in a facilities garage to the rear of the Township Municipal Building. While the lot is flat and easy to navigate, there was no marked handicap parking.
I would like to stay in this polling place because of the room that I have here, and I can spread things out more than if I was in the old Township building, which is where, if you go up there, that's where the handicap parking signs are.
In the very front of that building,
they're close
right.
to that building, because that's normally, as the Township does business, this is their garage where only their employees go. Right. So we only use this as a polling place for public when we have elections going on.
But when they are going on, Americans, those who don't have disabilities and those who do, have the right to cast their ballots. But to do that, they have to first exercise another right, one quite literally hidden in plain sight. They have to get inside.
Probably the most important thing is just that everybody realizes how lucky we are to vote, and that we have to vote. You really, something that needs to be done.
Well, welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. As you saw in the documentary about the polling places. So, Melissa, once again, what would you like the public to get out of this documentary?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, I think from watching the documentary, you can see that everyone who appeared in it was really open, and they were happy to really talk about this with us. And so I would hope that everyone really approaches these issues exactly as they did, that, you know, this is something that we can all learn about, and if we work together, we can make it easier for everyone.
And Dan, your input here.
I think the same thing is that, being open to the fact that, we need this type of consciousness amongst people, but also that when we talk about disability and we talk about difference, that it really is a civil rights issue. It's an issue of diversity and multiculturalism, that we shouldn't be excluding people with disabilities when we're talking about the idea of access and diversity and including everyone. If we're going to include people, inclusion has to include everyone. So I think that's the big thing, is that this is a civil rights and a multicultural issue, and we need to view it in that way and address it with the same muster that we do with everything else. So.
And here again, it's not a political thing.
No.
Okay, it's something that you could be white, black, pink, turquoise, no matter what it is. It's somebody who has a disability that you're trying to bring awareness to. Do you think that the Luzerne County and parts of Lackawanna will adhere to some of these suggestions?
Oh, I absolutely think so. Luzerne County has a new director of the voter services, and she is just wonderful. Very interested in these issues, very knowledgeable about them. And of course, she's recently hired. And I certainly expect that she's just going to do a wonderful job. We are going to go back and continue this in May during Election Day then, just to see how things are. But I'm feeling very, very positive about it. We've gotten a wonderful reception from everyone when we've broached these issues.
Well, congratulations to the both of you for bringing that up. I would tell Paul I appreciate him calling me and having you on the show. And as I mentioned to you folks, we're very proud that our production department here at SSP TV Samson Productions won the Accolade Award, which is an honor of documentaries, one documentary won 2 awards with it. And you could appreciate what I'm saying, Dan, being in this, okay? Once again, congratulations on what you're doing. Thanks for coming on the Sam Lesante Show. Folks, don't forget, Sam at ssptv.com and 24/7 on ssptv.com. You can watch every one of our shows, the 21 we produce, plus this current show will be seen anywhere you want to see it in the world. We'll see you next time.